Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for fantasy Premier League content for the 2021-22 season. My name is Dan and welcome to the Gameweek 11 episode of Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid, the series on this channel where we talk about transfer moves that we possibly want to make, transfer moves that we possibly don't want to make, try and avoid those traps, try and get rid of those players we don't want to have right now, and etc, etc, etc. Hopefully this series is going to help you out. I know it's a favourite on this channel with one we've been running for quite some time, so hopefully you do enjoy this video. If you do, of course, please do leave a like, and of course, please do subscribe if you're new around here. I know I'm saying it every single video at this point, but I am very, very excited at the prospect of hitting 100,000 subscribers. Honestly, we could do it within the next 2 weeks, but I can only do that with your help. So subscribe if you haven't done already. If you have, tell all your friends to subscribe if that's okay. Yeah, would be really, really appreciated. But before we go any further, a quick word from our regular sponsor, which is, of course, OneFootball. For those of you who don't know what OneFootball is, it's a mobile app / website for all things football. Whether you want to check out the football scores for games you're possibly not watching, whether you want to check out the lineups before the game starts, whether you want to check out some of the stats from various games, particularly when there's European games. There's a lot of European games on midweek. This week in particular might affect our FPL decisions, but more importantly, it's good to have an eye on what's going on in the European games as well, even if we're not watching all of the games. And I just think OneFootball is the perfect app, website, whatever, to do that. It's completely free, and you can download it using the link at the top of the description. So go for it, guys. So how does it work? Well, buys are players you probably don't have but should consider bringing in. Sells are players you probably have but should consider removing. Keeps are players you probably don't have, and avoids are players that you're probably pretty hyped up about right now, but I actually think you should avoid them. So yeah, those are the different categories. Let's get on straight away with some buys. So our first buy today is Ivan Toney. I do think Toney is probably the #1 transfer target for most of us this week if we don't already have him, which is kind of a strange thing to say about a player who hasn't actually scored in 5 game weeks. But this one is kind of all about those fixtures. So whether it's Toney or Mbeumo, now is really the time to hop on those Brentford attackers. Now the home game against Norwich is next, then Newcastle, Everton after that, who have been defensively just dreadful, Spurs, Leeds, and then Watford. That's kind of takes us all the way to game week 17. So a really nice run here of favourable fixtures for an attacking team. In terms of total goal involvement, so goals and assists, potential combined of those two factors, we are really looking at Toney as the #1 player for Brentford, so he's taking plenty of shots, he's creating good chances for his teammates, and he's perhaps been a little bit unlucky not to pick up some more points. If we're expecting Brentford to score a couple of goals in each of the next few games, you can predict quite confidently that Toney will play some part in that and therefore pick up you some FPL points. We then have penalties, Norwich and Newcastle in particular, teams that concede a lot of penalties, and Toney is obviously the penalty master extraordinaire. And also, with so many forwards flopping at the moment, a lot of you guys will be looking for that perfect forward replacement. So if I had to go for one, the talisman in an attack-minded team, I guess as well, with some of the easiest fixtures possible, all in a row, that doesn't sound like such a bad shout, does it? Our next buy is Ben Chilwell. I think after the Reece James haul at the weekend, it's kind of been a really good reminder how important it is to have at least one of the 2 Chelsea wing-backs in our teams. Now, I know a few people have been asking me kind of already, Chilwell versus James, the whole debate on that, which one should you go for? I think most people right now would be saying James. Perhaps that's kind of due to recency bias a little bit, but over the past 3 game weeks, the 2 of them have identical scores. If you go back 1 game week further, Chilwell's actually beating James. But if we're talking about a long-term pick, a set and forget type guy, I still think I slightly prefer Chilwell. And if I was someone who didn't have either right now and I desperately needed to get one of them, I'd be leaning towards Chilwell. And there's a few reasons for this, and you guys may agree or disagree with some of these kind of takes, but this is what I've got anyway. So I think there's less competition for Chilwell's place in the Chelsea team. So it's a straight battle between Alonso and Chilwell at left wing back. I think Chilwell, by now we know, is the clear preferred option no matter what the game is. The only exception may be when Tuchel wants height, and a forewarning, guys, Tuchel may want height against Burnley next. Alonso is a little bit taller than Chilwell. On the other hand, James is in direct competition with Azpilicueta and Hudson-Odoi for his place on the right. And with that one, it's not so straightforward as who's the best player or who's playing the best at the time. Those 3 right wing-backs will rotate depending on the tactics of each game. And whilst James will probably be preferred in the easier fixtures, particularly early on in the season where Chelsea maybe need a few goals without Lukaku. I think in many ways this has created a bit of a perfect storm for James that I don't think is going to last forever. The other factor is the one-pointers. There is a historical set of evidence that suggests that when Chilwell is benched, he stays benched. That's great in the current climate of FPL when usually we're kind of finding ourselves with a great bench. We're kind of talking about players like Livramento, Duffy, Smith Rowe. People have got kind of these kind of players on their bench. It becomes a case of when it kind of doesn't matter when one of our players is benched, as long as they stay benched so our bench players can replace them in our starting 11s. With James, it's a little bit different. If he's benched, he's far more likely to come on late in the game for one of those horrible one-pointers, in part due to his versatility as a player. So James can act as a bit of a utility man and help change the game tactically by being brought on from the bench and played in various positions. Great for him, great for Chelsea, but bad for FPL when he inevitably scores that one fantasy point. So yeah, in conclusion, forget Rudiger, forget Aspilicueta, consider James, but in the long term, I still think Chilwell is our guy. On to some sells. We're going to start you off with Ismaila Sarr. So it kind of looks like Sarr is playing a little bit deeper on the wing under Ranieri. Watford will now have a kind of a two-man strike force of Josh King leading the line with one of Pedro and Dennis. So we're naturally going to see Sarr slightly less involved than previously, I think. That's kind of already started to happen. Sarr's attacking numbers have kind of plummeted, just 4 shots in the last 2 games. From, pretty poor goal-scoring opportunities as well, pretty poor goal-scoring positions, and only 1 key pass as well. He did have a goal disallowed, but I don't think that's enough to convince me. The other numbers, they look pretty weak, but for a cheap midfielder, I think you could maybe forgive them if it weren't for these upcoming fixtures. Watford play Arsenal, United, Leicester, Chelsea, and then Man City in the next 5 game weeks. This is going to be a super, super hard run of fixtures for them, and even the best Watford players, the more desirable Watford players right now, I guess you'd put maybe Josh King in that bracket. I think even those guys are going to struggle for points a little bit during this run. It's just a really convenient time to hop off those Watford guys. And if you still have Sarr knocking around in your team, there are plenty of, fairly decent replacements. So if you're kind of looking for someone around the same rough price, maybe you could go for Rafinha or Maxwell Cornet. If you fancy a bit of a differential, Cornet could be a nice one, particularly after this Chelsea game. Or you could go ever so slightly cheaper, where there are 2 really nice options in Mbeumo. Mbeumo, of course, part of this Brentford team with insane fixtures. They're likely to be, Mbeumo's probably going to be likely to be the guy who has taken the most shots in that Brentford team. And then we've got Smith Rowe as well, who's in excellent form with some relatively favourable fixtures as well. I would probably go for one of the latter 2 as a Sarr replacement. So one of Mbeumo or ESR. I'd maybe go just about prefer Mbeumo, just because I like his fixtures and underlying numbers a little bit better, but I think they're both good picks to go for as your Sarr replacement. Another midfielder on the chopping block is Benrahma. West Ham are officially about to enter that nightmare run of fixtures that I'm sure is scaring the hell out of a lot of you guys. Liverpool, Wolves away, which I think will be difficult. Man City away, impossible. Brighton, then Chelsea. Even after that, it's Burnley away and then Arsenal away. So I just think there are going to be limited points on offer for some West Ham players. And Benrahma, I think, fits the bill of players who might struggle for points a little bit. So as you can kind of see from his stats, he's still taken an insane amount of shots, but you can also see here 0 big chances, only 5 shots in the box and only 4 on target in his last 5 games. And it seems like it's getting, less and less and less with each game that goes by. I wondered if maybe that confidence and form that we saw early on in the season, that's kind of getting lower and lower. I just don't think he has been a star man or even a particularly key player in the most recent games anyway. And I think this is kind of backed up by his dwindling minutes on the field as well. In terms of key players for West Ham, I think Bowen and Fornals have actually been playing better and with slightly better output as well. So I'd be slightly more tempted to keep those guys. If Benrahma, however, is going to get his mojo back and kind of compete with what those other attackers for some points, I don't know. I feel like to get your mojo back, this is not the right run of fixtures for it. So to the 32% of FPL managers that still have Benrahma in their teams, I think you've got to sell. Again, we're going to be looking mainly at Rafinha. I'm just putting out Cornet out there. It's a little bit of an out there one, I know. But, Rafinha and Mbeumo, Smith Rowe, these are the kind of guys we're going to be looking at. If you're thinking about a little restructure as well, maybe getting like a Son or Foden in somewhere along the line, again, Benrahma would be a really good sacrifice to try and make that happen. So that is the end of the West Ham talk. Or is it? No, it's not, as we haven't actually talked about Antonio yet, which you guys will probably saw that one coming, didn't you? A player that a lot of people will be looking to get rid of ahead of some pretty terrible looking fixtures, as we've already discussed. But on the other hand, the fixtures after the tough run do look really good. From game week 16, West Ham's fixtures look pretty strong, but from game week 18, they look phenomenal, starting with a Norwich home game. And with the fact that so many of us bought Antonio at 7.5, maybe slightly more, are we really going to want to be put in a position where we sell Antonio for 7.8 million and have to buy him back for 8.2 million? A 7.8 sell and buy back for 8.2, essentially sacrificing 0.4 million in budget for a player that we are going to want to have back at some point. And who are we going to be replacing him with anyway? Toney, Wilson, Hwang, Jimenez maybe. Decent enough players, but they're a fair bit cheaper than Antonio as well. So are you going to have the money in the bank to upgrade back to Antonio when he becomes essential again? You may say yes now, but things move very fast in FPL, and a carefully laid out plan very quickly turns to mud. So I think the question we really need to ask ourselves with Antonio is, can he tick along nicely enough over the next few game weeks to make him worth keeping? And if not, can we cover those tougher games with our bench? And I think in most scenarios, the answer is yes. So Antonio has performed well over the last year against big teams. This season, he's already scored against Spurs, twice against Leicester. Last year, we saw him score against Spurs again. He scored in both games against Man City. He grabbed a total of 2 goals and 1 goal and 2 assists, in the 2 Arsenal games last season as well. West Ham and Antonio have turned up against the big teams in recent history. Why? Because West Ham are a big team. They're probably, and there's probably a bit of a debate to be had here, but I would probably say that West Ham are the 4th best team in the country right now, and the league table kind of backs that up as well. Antonio is the centrepiece of attacking play for this great West Ham team, and honestly, I think the idea of thinking that West Ham are going to suddenly go downhill in the big games might actually be a bit of a trap of an idea. I think there's a big possibility that they can compete. I can see them scoring against Liverpool. I can maybe even see them getting a point against Liverpool. You can really see that happening. Maybe even a win after Liverpool's a very, very recent form. Anyway, I can kind of see West Ham and Antonio scoring maybe against Wolves, maybe beating Wolves. Man City's kind of tough, but as we know, Antonio scored in both fixtures against City last season. Brighton, they've kind of slipped recently. Maybe they're beatable by West Ham, a team as good as West Ham. You can score against them as well at the moment. Chelsea, you can see them conceding a few chances, whether Mendy's going to pull it out of the pack again. After those fixtures, which I've kind of just described, it's kind of plain sailing again. So do I think Antonio is an essential pick to have right now in your team? No, absolutely not. But I don't think anyone should be in a rush to sell him for no good reason. If you're desperate to swap him for another forward, fine. But I just have this feeling that selling Antonio will make us all look a little bit silly. He's playing well. His underlying stats are still phenomenal. He's been underperforming, perhaps due to a little bit of misfortune. I truly do think the points are still coming for this particular player, despite the fixtures. Our next keep is Mason Mount. Now, lots of people bought in Mason Mount either ahead of a good run of Chelsea games or after his hat-trick against Norwich. That was only a couple of weeks ago, and now the same people are selling him already. In fact, he's already the 3rd most sold player this game week. Why? What, do you think this is kind of a mistake, or is this maybe a knee-jerk? I think if we look at this maybe from a psychological point of view, maybe the same people who instantly bought Mount after his huge point score in Game Week 9 would be the same kind of people to sell him immediately after a 0-pointer in Game Week 10. Buyers and sellers who also buy and sell way too early, several days before the deadline, the knee-jerk style of FPL management, if you like. And if you think that might be describing you, I guess that my best advice is to try and get you to relax a little bit, chill out, don't panic, try to remember why you bought the player in the first place. Did you like his fixtures? Do you like the fact that he plays for an advanced role in Chelsea? He's a decent price. Do you like that he's on set pieces? What's changed between then and now, realistically? He had a non-COVID related illness and missed 1 game. Is that really reason enough to knee-jerk him out? He cannot honestly be a priority sell, can he? Now, I'm not trying to hype him out up. He's not not the kind of player I'd ever really be interested in buying, even after that hat-trick. But if I had him, I can't really think of a good reason to sell him at this exact moment. He's not expected to be involved in the UCL game tonight. He should be back to fitness by the weekend. Some Chelsea fans might even think he's going to be integrated back into the Chelsea team more and more and more. I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one, but so many people are selling him already, and I don't really get why. So that's why I think I have to question it a little bit in videos like this and kind of add him as a keep. Finally, some avoids. We'll start you off with Gabriel. Experienced FPL managers, you kind of will already know the drill here. A random centre-back defender, they'll get a goal, a clean sheet, and all 3 bonus points. 15 points as a game week score. And many FPL managers will say, wow, this guy is must be an amazing FPL asset. I absolutely must buy him. Little do they know that this particular centre-back scored a header from a corner, their only goal of the season, and they're unlikely to score more than 1 goal between now and the end of the season. That 15-pointer is now gone. You've missed the boat. You can't get those FPL points retrospectively. The player is extremely unlikely to score a score like that, a 15-pointer again for another year, a whole year before that's going to happen again. And now you're kind of stuck with a player that you don't really want because you kind of expected way too much from them. This pattern occurs every couple of weeks, and Gabriel is the latest trap player who has already tricked tens of thousands of FPL managers into buying him. And looking at the underlying stats and data, there's no reason to believe that lightning is going to strike twice in the same place. Gabriel, in my opinion, is a waste of money in a way. You can get the same thing for 4.4 million with Ben White. You can get more than Gabriel offers with Ramsdale in goal. Tomiyasu, I think, is a better option as well. I mean, honestly, I think I'd go as far as to say that out of the starting Arsenal defenders, Gabriel is the worst one to buy. So don't buy him. Don't even think about it. Gabriel is a trap and a big avoid. And our final avoid is Youri Tielemans. Yes, I am putting Tielemans on the avoid list again because, once again, he is one of the most popular transfers in. And apart from a couple of good scores in game weeks 8 and 9, I don't get it. To be honest, a couple of good scores is usually enough to convince a lot of people. But I'm looking through the other cheap midfield options, some we've kind of already spoken about today. And I'm just thinking, you have all of these attacking midfielders, these wingers, and you want to go for a deep-lying defensive midfielder like Tielemans. And just not just any deep-lying guy, a deep-lying guy that costs the same, if not more, than some of the most attacking players in the league. He's kind of crazy, really. So Tielemans has been reasonably creative, we can't really deny that, but with Maddison back in the team after the formation change, Tielemans is taking less and less set pieces. Yes, he will score the occasional wonder goal, but they're quite hard to predict when they're going to happen, and unless you literally plan to keep Tielemans the whole season, there's no guarantee that you strike gold here, and that seems like an inefficient way to play FPL. Last season was his best season ever, and he only scored 6 goals with 4 assists, and even if you think he's going to do slightly better this year, that's nothing to shout about really. And unless someone is seeing something different, something that I'm not seeing, I guess, I just don't really understand this trend, and I'm struggling to recommend him. There's so many great cheap midfield options right now, and I just don't think Tielemans is one of them. So in summary, Brentford are a team to target. I would make sure you have at least one of Toney or Mbeumo ahead of these fixtures. No problem in doubling up if that's something you'd like to do. I think it's crucial that you have at least one of Chilwell or James. I think I'd prefer Chilwell for the long term though. West Ham are an interesting one. In general, they are sells, they are avoids, though I would seriously consider keeping Antonio unless you feel you absolutely must sell him. Try not to make those knee-jerk moves. If a player scores 0 points in a game week, that doesn't always make them a sell. If a player scores 15 points in a game week, that doesn't always make them a buy. And finally, as usual, I have to recommend you guys make your transfers as late as possible this week. We have loads of European games to come. They're likely to impact your decision making, so don't rush into any decisions quite yet, I would say. And there we have it, guys. That's the end of the video. Hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, don't forget to leave a like before you disappear. And of course, do subscribe if you're new around here too. Plenty of content to come, as always, this week. We have got our experts video. That will be tomorrow. Then we will do a team selection video and a stream for the deadline as well. Maybe we'll try and sneak in one more video as well. We'll have to see. But yeah, really excited to share with you, particularly the team selection video. Really excited to share that one with you guys and reveal my new rank. If you want to desperately see my new rank, you can go check out the strategy stream that I recorded yesterday. Go for that. But yeah, aside from that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later, mates. Bye bye.